Okay, I'm Austin Hagan, professor in extension plant pathology here at Auburn. I'm going to talk a little about seedling diseases in cotton today. Essentially, seedling diseases are primarily a problem when cotton or any other crop, either seed germination is delayed or the seedling growth is slowed. Of course, we're looking at cold weather and corn seed in the soil, so we might actually, those folks that planted may have some issues with seedling diseases in their corn. But the risk factors for cotton seedling disease are planting in sandy soils. I already mentioned cool, wet conditions, essentially slowing the either rate of seed germination or seedling growth, makes them more vulnerable to attack by soil fungi. The deeper they're planted can contribute to seedling disease. If they're planting a seeder placed too deep, they're going to struggle to come out of the ground. Their growth is again going to be slowed, and they're more vulnerable to attack. Seed to soil contact may interfere with the rate of germination and seedling growth. May be an issue there. There's some discussion about whether some soil herbicides will interfere with either root development or slow growth, and again, you have more risk factors there. But basically, any soil or weather condition that either slows seed germination or seedling growth will contribute to problems with seedling disease in cotton. And there are some classic fungi that are associated with seedling disease. Pythium and Rhizoctonia primarily are those that are considered to be the primary seed rotters and seedling pathogens. You can have some issues with Ascochyta. Phalabiopsis causes black root rot in cotton, and it can also contribute to early season stand losses. And a newer issue that's coming into play is the Fusarium oxysporum, which is associated with Fusarium wilt in cotton. Apparently, there are some isolates of this fungus that are coming into play as causing a root rot in emerging cotton. It may be, in some cases, this pathogen is not associated with the cotton root rot, which is normally, it's a complex disease in cotton to get Fusarium wilt, but here the Fusarium oxysporum in and of itself may be serving as a seedling plant pathogen in cotton. And this problem has shown up primarily in southwest Georgia, where they're starting to see stand thinning due to Fusarium. There's some question as to the particular identity of the Fusarium oxysporum that's involved in this process, as to whether it's a newer strain or whether it's just an old strain exhibiting some new pathogenic activity in cotton. But it is a problem that has been showing up more and more in that particular area. That later in the season, particularly if you have root rot or root knot nematode present, then you get the classic Fusarium wilt. But the stand thinning was probably occurred early in the year, and then later on the cotton starts going down to wilt symptoms. And then when you see this, more often than not, you do find an association with the cotton root knot nematode. They've also associated some problems in Georgia. Now, whether they'd occur here in Alabama or not, with the presence of sting nematode, which is something new. With Rhizoctonia root rot, you tend to have a dry rot of the crown area. If it's Pythium, it tends to be wetter. I would guess that the Fusarium root rot and early season wilt diseases that are starting to crop up are also more of a dry rot type of symptom pattern. And really the only way to identify or distinguish between these two, or perhaps some of the other root rotters in seedlings like Phalabiopsis, would be to have samples sent to the plant diagnostic lab, and we would have to look at them and see which fungus is present and which one is not. Most or all cotton seed that's planted by farmers is treated with a fungicide. complex to manage rhizoctonia and Pythium-incited diseases. Now, there are some situations where we get into the use of either in-furrow fungicide sprays. And what we have here is just a slide illustrating the risk factors and the point values assigned to those risk factors. And if the total comes up to 200 or more, then in all likelihood, an in-furrow fungicide treatment would be warranted. As I mentioned before, the major risk factors are things like low soil temperatures in combination with cool and wet conditions. Seed quality comes into play, as does the history of seedling disease in that field. They're just, maybe due to rotational practices, just happen to be some fields where the likelihood of having stand losses due to seedling disease is greater. And of course, there's a lot of weight given to the fact that these fields have historically had some issues. Tillage comes into play, because I would probably guess that with a high residue situation and a lot of organic cover, that soil is going to be a little cooler than it might be if there was no cover there. And so you have an increased risk of seedling disease. Bedding can be used, particularly in lighter soils, to increase soil temperatures and maybe allow earlier planting. But if you don't, you're just planting flat and there are no beds, you're going to have a cooler soil. Reducing the seeding rate is fairly common in cotton today because of the cost of the technology in a lot of our varieties, and a number of growers have gone to 2 seed per foot of row. So if you reduce the seeding rate, you're planting early and the soils are wet, you're automatically into an in-furrow fungicide spray, and then soil drainage situations, which goes back to also will contribute to that risk. Now, your in-furrow fungicide treatments have specific ranges of activity, and so Quadris headline, Paraxor all target rhizoctonia and Pythium. Your Ridamil Gold is only a Pythium product, and you've got to have the combination material in order to pick up rhizoctonia. I mentioned Fusarium as being an issue, particularly in southwest Georgia, but it may be one here. And the only one of the in-furrow fungicide that will pick up that particular disease is Paraxor. Then we do have also as a early emergence treatment in cotton to control rhizoctonia, we have Elatus. So that's a little different treatment as compared with the in-furrow sprays. That'll be made later on when the risk factors for rhizoctonia, seed rot, and seedling disease are still high, and it would basically be what we would call an act-cracking treatment. Now, one other variable in all of this is Vellum Total, which has come out as an in-furrow spray for nematode control in cotton. And it so happens that the active ingredient in Vellum Total, flupiram, actually is a fungicide that just happens to have nematocidal activity. And when we're putting Vellum Total out in furrow for nematode control, we're actually putting a pretty fair slug of a fungicide out there. And Vellum Total does have activity against Fusarium, and of course, it would be used for cotton root knot control, so it will likely give some suppression of Fusarium in cotton. The other point is that it does not have Pythium activity, but more than likely you are going to also see some increased rhizoctonia control with Vellum Total in cotton. And it does have, or is labeled for rhizoc control in potato at rates where we're used similar to those that we're using in cotton. So even though there's no data to support that Vellum Total will control rhizoc in cotton, in all likelihood it will have secondary activity in that area as well. So as far as your general control practices to manage or to avoid seedling disease in cotton, it would help to rotate, because planting cotton year after year does build up a fungal microflora that can cause seedling disease in cotton. So rotation is going to be your primary means of managing that risk. Certainly addressing any soil fertility issues that might interfere with either seed germination or particular seedling growth, slow it down, if those are taken care of, that'll help. Chris Bauckham talked about soil temperature in peanut, which is just as important here in cotton. And so the soil depth temperature should be over 65. If you have to plant early, particularly in South Alabama, you may want to look at making raised beds and then planting into those as a means of getting in early. And then the last point is to avoid chemical injury, which may slow seedling growth. Thank you. Daisy says hi.
I don't have a lazy, so I don't.